I set the folded napkins down on the table. 12 of them, soft ivory linen, hand-pressed, shaped into cranes. The dining room was warm with candlelight and tension. My sister Marion was recounting her latest courtroom victory. My mother was adjusting the silverware for the third time. My father barely looked up from his bourbon. And me, I was the one they'd asked to help set the table. Again, my name is Clara Hensley. I'm 39 years old. I live in Charleston, South Carolina, on the upper floor of a historic townhouse I inherited from my grandmother, just 3 blocks from King Street, where the rain smells like magnolia and old brick. I restore antique textiles, not as a hobby, as a profession. Lace, tulle, hand-woven silk, sometimes forgotten in attic trunks, sometimes pulled from estate sales no one else bothers to visit. I don't have children. I don't have a husband. I don't have a resume they can read aloud at dinner parties. But what I do have is quiet, precision, and a financial portfolio larger than anyone in this room's suspects. Until now, it happened just as I brought in the cider. Emma, my niece, picked up my phone from the counter. "Aunt Clara, is this real?" She turned the screen toward the room. A notification still glowing, Chesapeake Advisors, net worth review complete, $13. 7M. Meeting confirmed, Elias Gray, Friday 10:0 a.m. Marion stood up so fast her chair scraped the hardwood. My father lowered his drink. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came. "Clara," Marion snapped. "What is this? Is this yours? Where did that money come from?" I took a breath, steady, deliberate. "From the years you called me a waste of potential." They always said it like a joke, like it didn't cut. Clara's in her artsy phase. Still playing with dead people's curtains, huh? Maybe she'll open an Etsy store someday. Wouldn't that be cute? I was 25, the first time I brought a restored 19th century bridal veil to Christmas dinner. Hand-laced Valenciennes, stitched in northern France. I'd spent 6 weeks cleaning it, thread by thread. I boxed it carefully, wrapped it in soft paper, tied it with navy ribbon, and placed it on the gift table for my sister Marion. She didn't open it until the end of the night, and when she did, she laughed. "It smells like a museum." Then handed it off to her daughter like it was dress-up material. My mother stepped in to smooth it over. "She meant well, dear. It's just not very practical, you know." Every holiday followed the same script. Marion would arrive in a new Mercedes, her kids in matching outfits. Dad would ask how many cases she'd won that quarter. Mom would brag about Emma's violin recitals, Max's math trophies. Then someone would remember I was there. "Clara, do you still live in that old house? Is that business of yours still running? Have you thought about teaching part-time, just to have something steady?" And always, always, that one phrase, said with a smile too polite to confront. "We're just worried about you." They worried when I turned down law school. They worried when I didn't marry Chris, the dentist. They worried when I bought the townhome, the one no one else wanted, with peeling paint and sagging floors. They worried because I never asked for help. And what they never said out loud, but always implied, was this: "If you're not like us, you must be wrong." One Thanksgiving, I made a cranberry tart from scratch. My mother said it was interesting. Marion brought a store-bought cheesecake. Everyone asked for seconds. Another year, I offered to host. No one responded to the group message. The next day, Marion announced she'd already booked a table at Charleston Harbor Club. "Just easier that way," she said. I stopped offering after that. They never visited my studio, never asked what I was working on. When I mentioned a museum commission once, my father said, "Well, I guess it's nice to have hobbies." I built an entire business. Restored heirlooms that brought people to tears. Filed taxes under a company name no one in this family ever thought to Google. And through it all, they kept believing I was the one who never quite figured it out. I let them because silence is sharp, and time is patient. And sometimes you don't correct the people who misjudge you. You let them keep talking, right up until the moment they realize the room is no longer theirs to dominate. I met Elias Gray on a Monday that smelled like rain and lemon oil. The kind of morning where light slants through old glass just right, and time seems to slow its breath. He stepped into my studio carrying a faded photograph and a sliver of wood. I'm restoring a window from 1840. The house belonged to a widow named Adeline Rousseau. Do you happen to know what kind of thread would have lined her parlor drapes? He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't quoting Pinterest. He knew the name, the year, the grain of the wood, and he cared about thread. That alone made him dangerous. In the best possible way. Elias wasn't from Charleston originally. He'd grown up in Vermont, studied architecture in Milan, and spent 6 years restoring monasteries in southern France. He didn't own a TV. He wore cuffed sleeves and always carried a notebook with sketches of hinges, locks, gables. He moved slowly, not because he was unsure, but because he noticed things no one else did. The first thing he said about my studio wasn't, "This is beautiful," or, "Did you decorate all this?" It was, "This smells like time." He came back 2 days later, with tea, and a fragment of damask upholstery from an abandoned opera box. "It's torn, but not ruined. Can you bring it back?" I asked why he didn't just replace it. He shook his head. "Because someone once sat on this, waiting for music." That's how it began. No declarations, no drama, just one restoration request after another, until one day I realized I was setting out a second cup before he even knocked. We didn't talk about family. He never asked why I lived alone. I never asked who he used to love. Instead, we talked about thread counts, silent buildings, the sad elegance of things left behind. He helped me install new lighting in the back of the studio, designed shelving for fragile lace. Once, when my hands cramped from 14 hours of needlework, he simply took the fabric and held it taut so I could finish the final stitch. Not a word, just a presence. When I told him I'd just received a museum contract from Savannah, he smiled, barely. "I knew someone would catch up to what you've known all along." He never asked how much I made, never pried into my accounts, but I knew he knew. Once, when I was sorting through invoices, he glanced at the spreadsheet and said softly, "You've built something they'll never understand, which is probably why they'll try to claim it." At the time, I laughed. I didn't know how right he was. And when the Thanksgiving chaos happened, when my phone screen lit up, and the room flipped from laughter to accusations, Elias wasn't there, but I texted him, just 2 words, "They know." He replied a minute later, "Let them. You built it anyway." Marian dropped her fork mid-sentence. It landed on her dinner plate with a hollow clink, splattering a dot of cranberry sauce across the white tablecloth. "Clara, is this real?" She was still holding my phone. Screen facing the room, lit up like a torch in a cave full of polite monsters. Chesapeake Advisors. Portfolio review. Total net worth, $13,748,200. Meeting confirmed with E. Gray Friday 10:0 m. My father blinked. My mother's hand froze mid-pour, the gravy thickened, and formed a slow amber bubble on the table runner. And then, silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that presses into your chest like someone just knocked the wind out of the air itself. Marian's voice came first, sharp, clinical. "Where did that money come from?" I didn't answer. She leaned forward. "Clara, what the hell is this? Is it legal? Are you laundering something?" My father cleared his throat. "Is this accurate? You really have that much?" His tone wavered, the same man who once said, "As long as she's not asking for money, I don't care what she does." My mother finally spoke, quietly, like trying not to spook a wild animal. "Sweetheart, why didn't you tell us?" I reached out and took the phone from Marian's hand. Calmly, wiped the screen, slipped it into my pocket. "Because you never asked." The room shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the daughter with the vintage clothes and creaky townhouse. I wasn't the family eccentric or the unmarried aunt with potential. I was a number, a pie chart, a resource. Marian folded her arms. "You've been hiding this for how long? We've worried about you. Thought you were just scraping by with old sewing kits and church lady curtains." I cut her off. "You mean the hand-stitched lace veil I restored that now sits behind glass in a Smithsonian collection? Or the opera cape that sold for 6 figures at the Atlanta Heritage Gala?" She blinked, didn't answer. Then came the pitch. "Of course. Emma just got invited to a pre-college fashion program in Paris," Marian said softly. But the tuition's steep. And I figured, now that we know you're doing so well. My father nodded. You don't have kids, no mortgage, no tuition to pay, it's not unreasonable. My mother added, a little support goes a long way in a family. Family, the same word they used to shut me up, keep me in line, bait me with love while trading it in for leverage. I smiled, thin, quiet, deadly. So this is what love looks like, now that you know the ledger. Marian's husband, who'd said maybe 10 words all evening, finally chimed in. I think what they're saying is, if you're not using the money, someone else could put it to better use. I looked at him for the first time that night. You think because I wear vintage and drink tea from chipped porcelain that I don't use what I earn. What none of them realized, what they still didn't see, was that everything in that room, from the napkins to the chandelier reflections in the wine glasses, I'd already seen it all before. The difference was, this time I knew exactly who was sitting across from me. Not family, not supporters, but collectors, disguised as concern. I stood up, pushed my chair back slowly. If anyone needs anything from me, tuition, favors, shares, slices, submit it in writing. I'll file it next to the letters I never received when I opened my business, or the visits that never came. I stepped out onto the porch. The night was quiet. Charleston wind brushing against my neck like a warning I had finally outgrown. Inside, the murmurs began. I didn't turn back. I stepped back inside exactly 10 minutes later. The room was quieter now. Not out of peace, but strategy. My father had poured himself another bourbon. Marian was whispering to her husband. My mother was folding napkins that didn't need folding. When I entered, 3 sets of eyes turned to me like I was a verdict walking on 2 feet. I didn't sit. Before anyone continues dividing up my bank account, I began. I'd like to clarify a few things. No one interrupted. For once, that money didn't fall from the sky. It wasn't a gift. No one in this room helped me when I worked 14-hour days, restoring threadbare veils with bleeding fingers. No one visited my shop. No one asked what I built. No one called to ask if I was eating. My voice didn't tremble, not anymore. You changed the subject when I spoke about fabrics. You scoffed when I mentioned auctions. You smiled politely when I talked about design commissions, the same smile people give stray animals. Marian leaned back, arms folded. I'm not saying you didn't work hard, Clara, but if you truly loved this family, sharing shouldn't be so hard. I looked her dead in the eye. I don't lack love, Marian, I lack mutual respect. My father placed his glass down. We're not forcing you. But we thought of helping you once, back when things were tough. You thought of it, I cut in, but never did it. You worried but never called. You judged but never asked. My mother, now teary-eyed, said softly, you're tearing this family apart over money. I turned to her, voice quiet but sharper than bone. No, you tore it apart when you only saw my worth after it became a number. Marian stood. If you walk out of here tonight without helping Emma, don't expect to be invited to her graduation, or mine, or any family celebration going forward. I blinked. You're using your kids to bargain with me. This isn't bargaining, she said. It's consequence. I turned to leave, grabbed my coat, slipped my phone into the inner pocket. My hands were cold, but my voice had never been more mine. I'm not saying no because I'm selfish. I'm saying no because I've learned the most expensive lesson of my life. I opened the door. Never give your worth to people who only see it when it turns into money. You'll regret this, my father called behind me. I paused, just long enough to look over my shoulder and answer. I used to, not anymore. And I stepped out, down the steps, past the driveway filled with Marian's SUV, back toward the kind of silence that doesn't erase you, but restores you. I returned home just as the street lamps began to hum. Charleston's old bricks were slick with early dew, and the scent of sweet olive hung low in the air. I didn't go upstairs right away. Instead, I unlocked the front door of the studio, stepped inside, and left the lights off. There was a calm in darkness that I had come to trust. It made every piece of fabric feel like a secret, every thread a decision. Elia's was already there. Leaning against the tall shelf near the back, arms crossed, sleeves rolled, he didn't ask what happened. He never did, he just said, It's cold, I put on the kettle. I nodded, slipped off my shoes, and walked across the room barefoot, letting the old wood creak beneath me. The sound was honest. We sat at the long table, where 2 bolts of velvet waited to be steamed. He poured the tea. I brought the indigo gauze from Savannah, he said quietly. The one with the ghost pattern in the corners. I smiled. Only Elias would refer to the warp of a textile like it had haunted memories. I didn't speak for a while, and he didn't fill the silence. He simply added a splash of honey to my cup, stirred once, and pushed it toward me. Eventually, I said, they saw the number, the truth, all of it. Elias took a slow sip, then replied, and what did they see first, your work or your worth? I looked down at the rim of the teacup. The number. He nodded gently. Then they still haven't seen you. That night, I didn't write in my journal. I didn't sort inventory or check invoices. I just moved among the fabrics like a woman who had finally stopped apologizing for where she chose to put her hands, her hours, her heart. Elias stayed. He didn't hover, didn't offer comfort like a fix, just existed in the same space, making it feel less like aftermath and more like arrival. The next morning, the first class resumed, 8 students. One of them was me, 22, quiet, brilliant, recently dropped out of design school because she couldn't afford studio fees. When she touched the edges of a 19th century silk panel, she cried. I didn't say anything. I just handed her a needle. Later that afternoon, Elias peeked into the classroom. You look like you're building an army of quiet revolutionaries. I laughed, the kind of laugh that didn't need to be graceful or approved. Only teaching them what I wish someone taught me, I said. At sunset, I found a note on my cutting table. Elias had left early, just a simple card in his handwriting. You built something they could never measure. And you loved without ever being thanked for it. That, Clara, is legacy. That night, I hung a new sign near the entrance. Mason a toil, restorations and refusals. Below it smaller. For the things that matter and the ones who never asked why. It was 2 weeks later when my mother showed up. No call, no text, just the sound of heels on the brick steps of my studio. And her familiar silhouette, olive coat, gloves too thin for the weather, lips drawn but painted. I opened the door without a word. She stepped inside slowly, as if the air might reject her. She looked around the space like it was a museum she'd never had a ticket to enter. This is beautiful, she said. You've never seen it in the afternoon, I replied. The light makes everything more honest. She nodded. Her eyes rested on a framed piece near the window. A square of faded linen, stitched by hand, dated 1959. Faint cursive initials still visible in the thread. MEH. She stepped closer. That's my wedding handkerchief, she whispered. It was, I corrected softly. Now it's preserved. I didn't ask why she came. She didn't offer. We sat at the same work table where I'd spent most of my adult life stitching back the edges of things others gave up on. She looked down at her hands. Your father still thinks you overreacted. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't react. I responded. Silence, but not the same kind as before. This one had space in it. After a pause, she said, we just never understood why you chose this life. The solitude, the fabric, we thought you were settling. I met her gaze. Steady, I wasn't settling. I was saving things. Things no one else thought were worth saving. Including myself. She didn't cry, but her eyes softened, the way old fabric does when steamed gently back to shape. She reached into her bag and took out a small box. Set it down. I found this in your grandmother's sewing cabinet. It was meant for you. I opened it. Inside, a pair of gold embroidery scissors, ornate, curved like question marks, still sharp. On the handle, a single engraved word. Clara. I closed the box and whispered, she believed in me, even when you didn't. My mother didn't defend herself. She just said, I don't know how to go back. I took a breath, stood up. You don't have to. You just have to stop pretending you never left. As I walked her to the door, she paused near the exit, fingers grazing the frame. Your sister's still angry. I know. And you're what, finished with us? I shook my head. Not finished, just finally free of waiting. She nodded once, then stepped out into the wind, didn't look back, didn't have to, because I wasn't watching her to see if she cared. I was watching the light catch the corner of that stitched handkerchief, the one she never thought would matter again. And in that quiet flicker of thread, I realized some things don't need forgiveness. They just need to be remembered. The next morning, I came downstairs before dawn. Charleston was still sleeping. Even the gulls hadn't begun to scream at the rooftops. In the studio, everything was still, spools of thread quietly gleaming under the pale early light. I made tea, opened the windows, and began to sew. It was a customer order, a morning shawl from 1872, black lace nearly dissolved at the corners. The kind of piece no one else would touch. I lifted the fabric gently, as if speaking to it, and that's when I noticed the email icon blinking on my phone. From M. Whitmore. Subject, Emma's application. I didn't open it right away. Didn't need to. Whatever was in there, request, demand, apology wrapped in formality, it didn't matter. Because I had finally remembered something they had worked very hard for me to forget. I owe no one my silence, and even less my surrender. By mid-morning, Elias arrived. He didn't knock, he knew better. He came in quietly, carrying a folded length of faded blue damask, said it came from a collapsed boarding school outside Savannah. They were throwing it out. I thought you might want to see what still breathes under the dust. I ran my fingers along the edge of the fabric and smiled. It's not beyond saving. He didn't say anything, just took off his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and joined me at the table. Side by side, without a word, we began unrolling a forgotten piece of someone else's history. At noon, I stepped away to update the sign on the studio door. Beneath the name Mason Etoile, I wrote in chalk, preserving what others dismissed, not accepting donations, only appointments and respect. Then I added a final line, one I never thought I'd let myself say aloud. You do not have to understand me to leave me in peace. That evening, as the windows turned gold with sunset, I pulled out my journal and wrote a single line, some women inherit, others restore. I built this not because I was left behind, but because I stopped waiting to be invited forward. Then I closed the book, blew out the candle, and let the quiet hold. Which one are you? 1, the person who asks for a share when success finally shows up. 2, or the person who builds quietly, stitch by stitch, without needing credit. Drop a 1 or 2 in the comments. No judgment, just truth.